The family of a man stabbed to death on a train have praised him as a devoted father who died in a horrific and pointless attack. Friends of a man shot dead during a police raid in Coventry say he was a former member of the armed forces. Russian officials have ruled out releasing a former US Marine with British nationality as part of a prisoner swap. And Gillingham of League One are through to the next round of the FA Cup after beating Premier League opposition. The family of a passenger stabbed to death on a train in Surrey yesterday have described him as an honourable man who would always help someone in trouble. Lee Pomeroy, who was 51, suffered multiple wounds in the attack, which happened in front of his 14-year-old son. A man was arrested early this morning on suspicion of murder. James Waterhouse reports from Farnham.
After a 17-hour hunt, police made 2 arrests early this morning at a ground floor flat in Farnham, 20 miles from the rail line where the attack happened. 2 people were detained, a 35-year-old man on suspicion of murder and a 27-year-old woman on suspicion of helping an offender. Grant Christie lives in the building and says officers arrived in force.
It sounded like someone was trying to kick a door in. That's what it sounded like to start with. And then, I jumped out of bed, put my ear to the door, listened to what was going on. Then I heard the police shouting, the usual stuff, put your hands up, turn around, and all that sort of thing. They led her out first, and then a few minutes later, they brought him out. I said there was armed police everywhere, lots more police turned up, and that was it.
Lee Pomeroy would have been 52 today. He was taking his 14-year-old son on a train from Guildford to London for a day out when he was killed. More details have emerged of what led to the attack, which officers say was carried out with an extraordinary level of violence. Sean O'Callaghan is the Assistant Chief Constable of British Transport Police.
We now know from the inquiries that we've been doing overnight and from witnesses that the 2 men were involved in a verbal discussion. That discussion lasted 3 to 4 minutes. It moved through one carriage from where they first boarded into another carriage, and that argument escalated to the unprovoked violent attack that sadly resulted in the death.
In a statement, Mr. Pomeroy's family described him as an honest, bright family man who loved music. His 14-year-old son is receiving care from specialist officers, and detectives have now shifted their focus to finding the weapon used. Officers have stressed this was a rare event, saying violent attacks happen in 1 in every million passenger journeys in England, Scotland and Wales.
An independent investigation has begun into the fatal shooting of a 31-year-old man by police officers during a raid on a home in Coventry. West Midlands Police say 2 other men were arrested on suspicion of a drugs offence. The dead man is said to have been a former member of the armed forces. Our correspondent Audrey Diaz is in Coventry.
Armed officers raided a house on a busy street near Coventry city centre just after 6 o'clock yesterday evening as part of what they've called an intelligence-led operation. 1 man was shot and 2 others detained. Eyewitnesses reported seeing 5 or 6 armed officers entering the house and hearing 4 or 5 gunshots. The injured man was seen being carried out on a stretcher and treated in an ambulance for half an hour as they tried to save his life. He was later pronounced dead. Although he hasn't been formally named, local people have identified him as 31-year-old Sean Fitzgerald, a former member of the armed forces who they say was having a haircut in the house at the time. Friends say he was planning a family with his girlfriend and described him as one of the kindest people you could meet. This man, Ali, spoke for many of Sean's friends.
He was the nicest guy ever. He'd go out his way to help anybody. And to be honest with you, he hasn't got much family at all, and we're his family, so, we need to get justice for my friend.
West Midlands Police have referred the incident to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. Investigators from the IOPC have taken initial statements from the officers involved and will now study video footage from their body cameras and CCTV cameras in the area. They've appealed for any witnesses to come forward. The road remains cordoned off as forensic examinations of the scene continue.
Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister has said Moscow won't consider a prisoner swap for Paul Whelan, a former US Marine with British nationality who's been arrested on suspicion of spying. Mr Whelan was detained by the FSB security service on December the 28th. His family say he's innocent and was in Russia for a friend's wedding. From Moscow, our correspondent Sarah Rainsford reports.
In the first official comment on Paul Whelan's arrest for espionage, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister described the case as very serious. Sergei Rybkov seemed to dismiss any suggestion that the former US Marine had been detained as a kind of hostage to exchange for a high-profile Russian detainee in the United States. Talk of such a swap was inappropriate, counterproductive and politically unjustified at this stage, Mr Rybkov said. He pointed out that formal charges against Paul Whelan had not been brought yet. On Friday, Britain's Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, warned that no person should be used as a pawn in any game. His comments came as speculation grew outside Russia that Moscow might be seeking to swap Mr Whelan for Maria Butina. She's admitted conspiring to act as an unregistered agent of Moscow in the United States. But Russia's foreign ministry, even Vladimir Putin, have condemned her case often and loudly. The chorus of complaints about Paul Whelan's arrest may yet grow too. He holds no fewer than 4 passports, including his British one. That has the potential to turn his case into a tense diplomatic standoff.
Demonstrators in Hungary have again been out on the streets of Budapest to protest against the policies of the nationalist government of Viktor Orban. They're angry at a new law giving employers the right to ask workers to do up to 400 hours of overtime a year, which they call a slavery law. Our correspondent Nick Thorpe is there.
Thousands of people marched through the centre of Budapest in bitterly cold January afternoon to gather here in front of the Hungarian Parliament. The main achievement of these protests so far has been the unprecedented degree of unity from the left to the right of the Hungarian political spectrum. But as the novelty as the demonstrations wears off, the problem facing organisers is how to maintain this momentum. There's talk today of a one-day general strike in 2 weeks' time. From the government side, these protests have been downplayed and the government media has been denigrating those taking part. There's also been a carrot, an offer of an 8% wage increase this year, followed by another 8% next year. Set against the government then, the protest organisers are hoping that this overtime law will act as a catalyst for all the grievances people across Hungary feel towards the Fidesz government.
The government in Poland has ordered checks on venues hosting what are known as escape games after 5 teenage girls were killed in a fire in the northern town of Koszalin. Escape games involve players solving puzzles to get out of locked rooms and have become a lucrative business in many parts of the world. Reporting from Warsaw, here's Adam Easton.
The 5 teenagers had gone for a night of fun to celebrate a birthday. Locked inside a small 7-metre square room, they were trying to solve puzzles to let themselves out. Leaking gas cylinders used to heat the building started a fire in the adjacent waiting room, a prosecutor said. Flames and toxic smoke spread quickly, and firefighters used specialised equipment to break in, but it was already too late. Escape rooms have become popular in Poland in the last 4 years. It's estimated there are around 1,000 in the country. The authorities have ordered that all venues now be checked to ensure they meet safety standards.
Iran has accused the Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt of meddling in its domestic affairs. A Foreign Ministry spokesman said he'd made hasty and incorrect remarks. In a statement last month, Mr Hunt accused Tehran of keeping the British-Iranian woman Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe in prison on spying charges to secure diplomatic leverage. One of the largest local authority areas in the UK has said it intends to ban fracking as part of a new green strategy. The Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, said planning policies drawn up by the region's 10 local authorities would include a presumption against any request to drill for shale gas. James Earl reports.
The proposed measures against fracking are part of an effort by Greater Manchester to be carbon neutral by 2038. The combined authority does not have the power to institute a full ban, and fracking companies could take any rejection to an appeal. But Mr Burnham said the individual authorities in the region were doing what they could within the legal structures at their disposal. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has also come out against fracking in his new draft London plan, and the devolved administrations in Scotland and Wales are opposed. Concerns about the drilling technique were raised once again before Christmas when a small earthquake was recorded at the Quadrilla fracking site near Blackpool. A spokesman for the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy has defended the government's support for fracking, saying shale gas has the potential to be a new domestic energy source, enhancing energy security and delivering economic benefits.
One of the chief executives of a ferry firm awarded a controversial government contract has revealed more about his company's plans for a post-Brexit cross-channel service. Jean-Michel Copien has told a French news site that seaborne freight would have had the funds to start running vessels from Ramsgate without the £14 million it received from the Department for Transport. Here's our business correspondent Joe Miller.
In the days since the BBC revealed that seaborne freight had been handed a government contract to ferry lorries across the Channel, despite never having sailed a vessel, the company's directors and executives have provided few details of their proposed operations. But in a brief interview with the news site Nord Littoral, Mr. Copien, a French shipping manager who previously worked on a service between Dover and Calais, said that Seabourn was on track to make 4 round trips per day between Ramsgate Port and Ostend in Belgium, in time for when Britain leaves the EU on the 29th of March. He revealed that the firm would initially employ 200 people to support 2 vessels, and predicted that both those numbers would double in the summer. While welcoming the money from the DFT, Mr. Copien insisted that Seabourn was already on track to launch before it was given a £14 million award, which he said only covered a percentage of the project's start-up costs.
Passengers on Arriva Rail North are suffering another day of disruption after members of the RMT union walked out for the 43rd time in a dispute over guards on trains. Further strikes are due to be held on every Saturday of the month. The company says public assurances have been given that a second member of staff will be retained on its services to look after customers, but the RMT wants a legal guarantee. Sport now, League One Gillingham provided the big shock in the 3rd round of the FA Cup, while Exeter are back on top of Rugby Union's Premiership. Hugh Wizencroft has the details.
League One side Gillingham defied the odds to take the scalp of FA Cup 3rd round Saturday, beating a side 45 places above them in the shape of Cardiff City of the Premier League. Elliot List was Gillingham's goal-scoring hero in their 1-0 win.
It's an amazing feeling. I mean, we had all the optimism in the world before the game. We took it to them. First half, we soaked up a bit of pressure, but second half, we took the game to them, and I think we deserved it.
Elsewhere, Accrington Stanley, also of League One, got a 1-0 win, this time over Championship opponents in Ipswich. Manchester United made it 5 wins from 5 under their interim manager Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, beating Reading 2-0 at Old Trafford. Burnley, Chelsea, West Ham and Everton of the Premier League also went through, while Brighton knocked out Bournemouth. Championship side Derby will take their Premier League opponent Southampton to a replay after a 2-2 draw at Pride Park. Middlesbrough and West Bromwich Albion are through, but Aston Villa were put out by fellow Championship side Swansea. Arsenal will be hoping to go into round 4 as well. They've travelled to face League One side Blackpool. Gary Flintoff is watching their opening half.
And 2 minutes to go to the break. It's Blackpool 0, Arsenal 2. The Premier League side in complete control in this first half, really. Young Joe Willock, twice right place, right time. The first shooting home after a free kick from Aaron Ramsey came back off the post, and his second from close range after good work from Alex Iwobi. Blackpool have had a couple of half chances. Armand Nonduye has got into a decent position on a couple of occasions. Should have done better, but it's a long way back for those wearing tangerine. Blackpool 0, Arsenal 2.
Gary, thank you. Exeter Chiefs have moved back to the top of Rugby Union's Premiership with a win over Bristol. Worcester beat 11-man Bath 21-19 with a try 14 minutes into added time. Wins 2 for Harlequins and Leicester. In the Pro 14, Ospreys beat Cardiff Blues, while Glasgow lost at Treviso.
A 90-year-old American cyclist has been stripped of a world record after testing positive for a banned substance. Carl Groves denied illegal doping but has accepted a public warning. Warren Bull reports.
On July the 11th last year, Carl Grove took part in the US Masters Track National Championships. He won his cycle race, the men's sprint for competitors aged 90 to 94, and was delighted to set a new world record for his age group. As is customary with record-breaking competitors, the US Anti-Doping Agency asked Mr. Grove for a urine sample and found he'd tested positive for a performance-enhancing drug, epitrenbolone. Mr. Grove claimed that his result was due to eating contaminated meat the evening before the big race, something USADA acknowledged, but it still stripped him of the record.
The headlines again. Relatives of a man stabbed to death on a train in Surrey in front of his 14-year-old son say he was a devoted father. An independent investigation has begun into the fatal shooting by police officers of a member of the armed forces in Coventry. Russia says it's not willing to consider a prisoner swap involving a former US Marine with British nationality who's suspected of spying. Greater Manchester's 10 local authorities intend to ban fracking in their areas. Thousands of demonstrators in Hungary have again marched against employment legislation which they call a slavery law. BBC News.